finding myself through love, guilt, and self-discovery. Before I ever met her, I believed love was a matter of timing, a coincidence wrapped in opportunity. That belief didn't come from any romantic notion, just observation, sort of equation where shared space, attraction, and vulnerability collided. I had seen people fall into relationships like they were slipping on ice, unexpected but inevitable. I thought that's how it would be for me too. I didn't expect it to unfold so slowly at first, so innocently, or with someone I didn't even notice the first time. Back then, I was too distracted with the noise of life to realize that something extraordinary was growing in the background like ivy creeping across a wall, steady and unnoticed until it was everywhere. We met in a coffee shop, the kind with cracked tiles and handwritten chalk menace, where the espresso always tasted a bit burnt, but the croissants were warm enough to make you forgive it. I went there often with a laptop I never typed on, pretending to write a novel that hadn't existed beyond a single sentence. She worked there part-time, always in oversized sweaters and with a quiet air that made her seem part of the furniture rather than someone to engage. I didn't know her name. I didn't care to. Not until the day she handed me my change and said, "You always order the same thing." I remember blinking at her, unsure whether to feel flattered or surveilled. She smiled then, a soft, slow smile that settled somewhere in my chest and made me forget how to respond. "It's comforting," I said, knowing what to expect. "You'd be surprised," she said, and walked away. That was the beginning. A comment, a moment, a thread pulling tight without me realizing it. From there, our conversations lengthened like shadows in the evening. Gradual, stretching, almost imperceptible. I started going to the cafe just to catch a glimpse of her. She learned my name. I learned hers, Lena. It suited her. Soft but distinct, like a whisper you actually listened to. There was something magnetic about her calm. She didn't fill silence with words, but she made silence feel safe. We started talking after her shifts, sitting outside on metal chairs under fairy lights strung along the awning. She told me about her art school, about how she painted with colors she never wore, about her childhood in a quiet town that only ever got mentioned during flooding season. I told her about the half-life I was living, the stalled career, the novel that didn't exist, the family I hadn't called in months. Somehow, with her, none of it felt shameful. And just like that, she became part of my routine. Then my craving, then my reality. We started spending evenings together that bled into mornings. She'd bring over her canvas and paints, set up on my floor like she owned the place, which in a way she did. I found myself writing again, for real this time. Not to impress her, but because she made my world feel like it had texture again. We didn't label what we were, and for a while, that was enough. We laughed easily, we touched often. We avoided the hard questions because we were too wrapped up in the softness of now. But the thing about floating is, eventually gravity demands its due. The first pull downward came on a Wednesday, as simple as a phone vibrating against a table. I saw a name flash on her screen that made her smile too quickly and turn it face down. It wasn't suspicion, not then. It was just awareness, a shift, a wrinkle. She dismissed it with a kiss and a joke, and I let it go. But something stayed. The second was subtler, a change in the way she answered questions. She used to offer stories, now she gave summaries. I'd ask how her day was, and instead of details about the woman with the peacock earrings or the man who spilled tea on himself, I got, "It was fine." We started doing things separately, not in a bad way at first, just that she wanted space to paint and I needed to write. But the space stayed even after the tasks were done. She stopped sleeping over, said she needed her bed, her routine, her silence. I didn't argue. I didn't want to be the one who clung. But sometimes I sat in our usual cafe alone, watching the door like it was supposed to open and fix everything. Then came the first real fight. It started with nothing. Her canceling plans last minute. Me already half out the door. I said, "You could have told me sooner." She said, "It's not that deep." I said, "It is to me." And then there was shouting, then silence, then the worst kind of apology. The kind you say just to make it stop, not because you mean it. After that, we didn't speak for 3 days. When she finally texted, it wasn't, "I'm sorry," or "I miss you." It was, "You left your sweater. I went to pick it up." She didn't invite me in. I should have known then that we weren't just unraveling. We'd already come undone. But hope is a stubborn thing. It finds cracks to nestle in, builds castles out of kind gestures. She still liked my Instagram posts. She still sent me pictures of sunsets with, "Thought of you." She still answered when I called. So I clung, quietly, desperately. I told myself all couples have phases, that love is cyclical, that we were just recalibrating. Then one day I saw her walking with someone. Another guy, his hand barely brushing hers. She didn't notice me. I didn't tell her I saw. I waited. I watched. I hoped I was wrong. That week she came over, said she missed my cooking. We made dinner together. She laughed at my bad jokes. We danced in the kitchen. She fell asleep on my couch. And for the first time in months, I believed maybe this could still work. The next morning, she kissed me on the forehead, said, "Don't get used to this," and left. I didn't see her again for 6 weeks. No replies, no explanations, just a vanishing act wrapped in radio silence. And still, I waited. Still, I told myself, she'll come back. She always does. But what I didn't understand then, and only began to realize much later, was that people don't always leave because they stop loving you. Sometimes they leave because love isn't enough, because it stopped feeling like home, because staying would mean lying to both of you. The message finally came on a rainy Tuesday, a single sentence. "I hope you find someone who makes you feel whole." No name, no apology, no goodbye. Just the end. But it wasn't the end, not really, not yet. Because I still had to walk back through the places where we laughed, erase the photos from my phone one by one, return to the cafe where the croissants still tasted like hope, and realize the barista no longer remembered my order. Grief isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just the quiet absence of a person you once knew better than yourself. Sometimes it's waking up and forgetting for a second that they're gone. Sometimes it's writing a story, hoping they'll somehow read it and understand what they broke. And sometimes it's learning how to live without the pieces they took with them. But that's just the beginning. Because what happened next, I never could have seen coming. I started walking everywhere. Not for fitness or peace of mind, but because motion made the silence less sharp. My apartment felt too still, every corner echoing with memories I hadn't agreed to keep. The red mug she loved still sat on the shelf. Her hair ties still clung to my lamp. I couldn't bring myself to throw them out. I wasn't ready to erase her. Not yet. The walks became rituals. I retraced the steps we used to take together. Through the park with the broken fountain, past the used bookstore that always smelled like wet cardboard and dreams. I walked aimlessly, letting the city decide where I ended up. Sometimes it led me to peace, sometimes to pain. But at least it led me somewhere. People talk about closure like it's a thing you can schedule, like it's a meeting you sit down for, get answers, and leave with your dignity folded neatly in your pocket. But closure never called. Closure ghosted me worse than she did. I replayed everything. Every word, every kiss, every missed cue. Had I asked too little? Too much? Was it the way I hesitated when she said, "I love you," that first time? Or how I never painted with her, never dipped my fingers in her world even though she had poured herself into mine? There's a cruelty in introspection. It doesn't care about truth, only torture. I told myself I needed to let go, but my heart was a hoarder. Weeks blurred into each other. Days marked by the songs I couldn't listen to anymore and the friends I avoided because they reminded me of us. I started filling my time with noise. Podcasts, background TV, cooking shows I never watched. Just anything to drown out the quiet. And then, one afternoon I saw her again. It wasn't planned. I was at the weekend market, pretending to care about tomatoes when I heard her laugh. That laugh. The one I used to chase like a compass. I turned too fast and saw her by the flower stand. She was holding tulips. With him. The same guy I'd seen brushing her hand all those weeks ago. Now his arm was around her waist, easy and familiar. She looked happy. Not forced happy, not post-breakup trying happy. Genuinely at ease, like she'd been living in sunlight since she left. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did and pretended not to. I didn't approach. What was I supposed to say? Hey, remember me? The guy you disappeared on after dancing barefoot in my kitchen. I stood frozen, watching her lean into him as they walked away. That's when it hit me. Not jealousy, not even sadness, but this hollow relief. I wasn't crazy. She had left for someone else. It wasn't me misunderstanding things. I had been replaced. There was something almost calming in the confirmation. Like I'd been trying to solve a riddle with missing letters, and suddenly someone handed me the rest of the clue. Of course it hurt, but at least it made sense. That night, I deleted her number. I didn't block it. I wanted the choice. But I needed to stop hoping. I boxed up the mug, the sweater, the little Polaroid of us laughing in the mirror. I didn't throw it all away. Just stored it in the back of my closet like a chapter I couldn't yet rewrite, but no longer needed to reread. Healing, as it turns out, isn't linear. It's a carousel. You think you're moving forward, then a song comes on and you're back in her arms, in your mind, if nowhere else. But slowly, gradually, the music changes. The carousel spins slower. And one day you realize you've stepped off. I started writing again, really writing. Not about her, not directly. But the characters had her eyes, her stillness, her sudden laughter. She haunted the pages like a ghost I wasn't ready to exorcise. The story I thought I'd never finish took shape. It wasn't a love story, not really. It was a story about letting go of the idea that love fixes everything, that love guarantees anything. And in writing it, I began to understand something I hadn't before. She didn't break me. She freed me. I had been standing still, waiting for life to happen. She lit a fire under me, and when it got too hot, she left. But the fire remained. For the first time in years, I had momentum. I started submitting short stories to magazines. One of them got published. Nothing major, just a local zine, but it felt like someone handed me back a piece of myself I didn't know was missing. I went out more, made eye contact with strangers, smiled without guilt, and then, almost inevitably, someone new entered the picture. Her name was Elise. We met at a friend's gallery opening. She was nothing like Lena. Where Lena was calm and elusive, Elise was vibrant and direct. She told stories with her hands, interrupted herself with laughter, and didn't pretend to be mysterious. She was all color and noise and warmth, and it terrified me. I kept my distance at first, polite, cautious, withdrawn. But she didn't flinch. She didn't push either. She just showed up, consistently, without games. We had coffee once, then twice, then dinner. No expectations, no grand declarations, just time spent honestly and openly. I told her about Lena eventually. Not all at once, but enough. Enough for her to understand the cracks I still carried. She didn't try to fix me, she just listened. And that was more healing than anything else. Our connection was slower, steadier. It didn't ignite the same fire. But maybe that was the point. It wasn't about intensity, it was about safety. About choosing peace over passion that always came with a price. One evening, after a long walk through the city, Elise asked if I believed in second chances. I said I wasn't sure. She said, "Maybe it's not about second chances. Maybe it's about new beginnings." I smiled. Then yeah, I believe in those. Still, a part of me held back. Not out of disinterest, but protection. I'd once believed someone was my forever, and I'd watched that belief disintegrate in silence. I wasn't ready to hand that power to someone again. Not yet. Elise didn't ask for it, she just stayed. And sometimes staying is its own kind of miracle. Months passed. Seasons changed. I didn't mark time by her anymore. I stopped checking her social media, stopped wondering who she was with or if she missed me. One day I saw her name in a gallery program, an exhibit she was part of. A painting called The Sound of Silence. I didn't go. I didn't need to. That chapter was closed, even if I never got the ending I wanted. Life doesn't always give you that. What it gave me instead was the ability to love again, but wiser, slower, with my eyes open. I thought the twist would be her coming back, that she'd realize what she lost and show up at my door. But that wasn't our story. The twist was this: there was no twist. Just growth, just change, just a quiet kind of redemption. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end either, because just when you think you've settled into peace, life hands you a letter, or a message, or a memory. Something that shifts the frame again. Something that reminds you, even the past has teeth. And that reminder came the very next day. The letter arrived without a return address. Just a plain white envelope slipped through my door like a whisper. I almost threw it out, assuming it was junk or some forgotten utility notification. But something about the handwriting, delicate, slightly tilted, unmistakably familiar, made my chest tighten. I sat down slowly, staring at it as if it might open on its own. I didn't want it to be from her. And I didn't want it not to be. Hands trembling more than I'd like to admit, I opened it. The first line hit like a soft punch. I didn't know how else to reach you. There was no name, no date, just her voice bleeding through ink and memory. As I read, my throat closed. She spoke of absence, not mine, but hers. She said she thought she'd done the kindest thing by walking away without a fight, that fading out would hurt less than shattering everything face to face. She told me he wasn't who I thought, that yes, there had been something, a spark, a confusion, a fleeting pull. But it hadn't lasted. That what they had was only real long enough to make her question everything and end before she could regret it out loud. She said she'd gone to therapy. That for the first time, she'd started looking inward instead of outward for blame. That for months, she tried to erase me from her system like a fever, but all she found were echoes. That maybe we weren't meant to last, but we weren't meant to end like that either. The letter didn't ask for forgiveness. It didn't ask for anything. No phone number. No plea, just closure. Raw, imperfect, overdue. I read it 3 times before folding it back into the envelope. Then I stared at the wall, unsure whether I felt peace or pain. Maybe both. Maybe that was the price of clarity. Elise noticed the shift in me that week. We were cooking together when I zoned out, burning the garlic and forgetting the pasta. She didn't ask immediately, just looked at me like she was waiting for me to offer the truth instead of dragging it out. That was her way. She never demanded things. So later that night, I told her. I handed her the letter, actually, because I didn't know how to say it all without losing something in translation. She read it quietly, her eyes scanning faster than I expected. When she finished, she folded it once and set it down on the table like something sacred. "How do you feel?" she asked. I told her I didn't know. She nodded. "That's okay. No accusations, no comparisons, just space." I didn't know how much I needed that until she gave it. But space also breeds contemplation. That letter started to worm its way into the corners of my mind. Not because I wanted her back. I didn't. At least I didn't think I did. But because it reopened a door I'd locked without looking behind it. I started dreaming about her again. Not romantic dreams. Just fragments. A shared umbrella in the rain. Her laughing as pigeons scattered. Her brushing paint off her jeans in my living room. Moments that didn't matter until they were all that mattered. I began to question everything I thought I had settled. Was Elise a rebound I turned into a refuge? Had I mistaken calm for connection, healing for love? Or was I just scared of being haunted again and turning that fear into distance? I didn't tell Elise about the dreams. Some truths feel more like weapons. But she could sense something had shifted. We still talked, we still laughed, but the rhythm was off. And I knew deep down she deserved more than someone who hesitated at doorways of the past. One night we were walking home and she stopped outside her building. "You don't have to say it," she said. "But I can feel it. You're somewhere else." I wanted to argue. I wanted to grab her hand and swear I wasn't. But lies, even loving ones, are still lies. I think I need time, I said carefully. Not because I want to go back to her. I don't, but because I need to make sure I'm not trying to rewrite history or run from it either. She gave me a sad smile. I always knew I was arriving in the middle of your story. I reached for her, but she took a step back. Go finish it, she said. Then come find me if you start a new one. She walked inside without another word. I stood there for 10 minutes, waiting for some bolt of clarity, some epiphany. It didn't come. Only the cold and the quiet and the realization that I was once again alone. By choice this time, but no less alone. The next morning, I opened the letter again. I read between the lines this time. The hurt, the fear, the longing wrapped in regret. And for the first time, I saw her not as the person who left, but as someone who was just as lost as I had been. That didn't make what she did okay, but it made it human. And maybe that was enough. I wrote her back. Not with expectation, not even with the hope of a reply. Just to release something. I told her I forgave her. Not because she earned it, but because I needed to. I told her I was doing okay. That her leaving broke something that eventually taught me how to build again. I didn't say I missed her. I didn't say I still loved her. I didn't know if either was true. I just said thank you. For what we had, and for the silence that followed. I mailed it the next day, then walked the long way home. Spring was beginning to bloom. Tiny green buds along the trees, people shedding coats, kids chasing each other down sidewalks like freedom was a game you could play. I sat in the park for hours, letting the wind remind me that not everything needs to be held onto. Some things pass through you like weather. Beautiful, unpredictable, necessary. Days turned into weeks. No response came. I didn't expect one. I focused on finishing my second story collection. I started volunteering at a local reading program. I called my parents. I forgave myself slowly. Then one day, as I was leaving the library, a familiar voice stopped me cold. You still walk like you're in a hurry to escape something. I turned around. It was her. Lena, standing there in a pale coat, hair shorter, eyes older. For a second, I didn't believe it was real. We stood in silence, two ghosts resurrected in daylight. He, I said finally. She nodded. Heek. We stood like that for what felt like an entire season. I got your letter, she said. I waited. It meant more than you know. Her voice was careful. She looked down. I'm not here to complicate your life. I just wanted you to know that. I didn't know what to say. The weight of our history settled between us like fog. Are you okay? I asked. She smiled softly. I am now. Another pause, another breath. You. I'm getting there. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small package. This is yours? I opened it later. It was the red mug. Clean, untouched. With a note inside. Some things belong to you even when I don't. I held it for a long time. Not crying, not laughing, just still. I didn't contact her after that. And she didn't reach out again. We had our final scene. No drama. No explosion. Just a moment of quiet redemption. A closing curtain. And in that silence, something beautiful began to grow again. Love. Not lot yet, but possibility. And this time it was mine. Summer came with a gentleness I hadn't felt in years. The kind of warm breeze that doesn't ask questions, just passes through your hair like it's always been invited. The city bloomed around me. Cafes spilling out into sidewalks, musicians filling the streets with longing, strangers laughing over cold drinks. And for the first time since everything shattered, I wasn't watching from the outside. I was part of it. I started frequenting new places, places she had never touched. New streets, new benches, new routines. I realized how much of myself I'd lost trying to preserve the ghost of a relationship. Now, I was building again, not just healing, but discovering parts of myself that had never had the space to grow before. I painted my apartment. I bought new furniture, not out of necessity, but defiance. Every nail hammered into the wall felt like a declaration I'm still here. I'm different now. I began seeing Elise again, but not how you might expect. Not romantically, She reached out weeks after our last conversation with a simple message: coffee. I hesitated before answering. Not because I didn't want to see her, but because I didn't want to blur the lines again. But curiosity won. When I walked into the cafe, she was already there, sunlight dancing across her face. She looked happy, not just externally, but in the way people glow when they've finally made peace with something. We talked for hours. About everything except what had passed between us. And strangely, it wasn't avoidance, it was respect. We had lived that chapter. We didn't need to reread it. She had started dating someone else, a gentleman named Rafa, who taught music to kids and baked his own bread. And instead of jealousy, I felt relief. She deserved someone who wouldn't hesitate at the edge of love. I wasn't that person for her. Maybe I never had been. What we had was real. It mattered. But some people enter your life to help you fix the mirror, not be the reflection you keep. After we parted that day, I walked the long route home and realized something startling. I didn't feel broken anymore. Not even bruised. I felt light, whole in a way that didn't depend on anyone else to hold the weight. I threw myself deeper into my writing. The stories poured out like old friends coming home. Some were melancholy, others sharp with irony, but each one blood with truth. Truth I had been afraid to touch before, afraid it would burn. A small independent publisher reached out after reading one of my essays in a journal. They wanted to compile my work into a collection. I didn't react with joy or disbelief. I just smiled, quiet and steady, like I had known this was coming. Like maybe the pain had carved space for exactly this. In celebration, I went to the beach alone. A quiet one, far from the city. I sat in the sand with a notebook, watching couples walk past me with interlaced fingers and salt-kissed grins. And I didn't feel lonely. That was the miracle. I didn't feel anything but peace. I wrote down a single sentence. Sometimes the love of your life teaches you how to live, not how to stay. And I closed the notebook. I thought that was the end. Truly, I believed the story had reached its natural conclusion. But life doesn't like to be predicted. It waits for you to breathe easy, then changes the wind. It was autumn when I saw her again. Not Lena, not Elise. Her name was Maja, and she was running late. She spilled coffee on her shirt as she squeezed into the bookstore seat across from me, muttering apologies in half English, half Polish. I wasn't supposed to be there. My reading event had been rescheduled due to a double booking, and I only stayed because the manager offered me a free drink to make up for it. Maja was there for someone else's event, but sat at my table by mistake. She laughed when she realized it, cheeks flushed, and made a joke about fate and misplaced chairs. We started talking, not flirting, not even particularly deep at first, just the kind of conversation that drifts into comfort so naturally you forget to check your phone. She was a translator, working mostly with poetry and medical texts. She loved sad films and had a habit of finishing people's sentences. Not rudely, but like she couldn't help being in sync. We didn't exchange numbers that night. She left with a smile and a wave. But I couldn't stop thinking about her. 2 weeks later, I saw her again, this time at a museum. A coincidence, maybe, or maybe some invisible string had decided it was time. She recognized me first, said something about serendipity. I asked if she believed in signs. She said no, but that she always paid attention when the universe repeated itself. We spent the day together, wandering through exhibits and sharing ridiculous opinions on abstract art. I told her I thought one sculpture looked like a pretzel having an existential crisis. She laughed until she couldn't breathe. That sound. I hadn't heard a laugh like that in years. We exchanged numbers this time. Not urgently, not with promises, just two people curious enough to keep walking the same path. We took it slow, deliberately. Coffee turned into walks, walks turned into dinners, dinners into weekend trips. Every step felt earned. There were no grand declarations, no dizzying highs or desperate lows, just presence, just kindness, just real. She never asked about my past, not at first. But when I told her, she listened without flinching. When I mentioned Lena's name, she didn't try to fill the silence, just squeezed my hand and said, "I'm glad you made it through." That's when I knew. Not because of fireworks or obsession or longing, but because for the first time, love didn't feel like a gamble. It felt like a choice I wanted to keep making. We talked about the future one evening under a tree full of lanterns. I told her I didn't believe in soulmates anymore, that I believed in timing, in work, in staying curious. She said she believed in weather, how people pass through your life like storms, like sunshine, like seasons. Some you dress for, others change your whole landscape. We were quiet after that, but not awkward, just full of what had been and what might be. As we sat there, I realized something else. Lena hadn't just been my heartbreak. She had been my mirror. She had shown me who I was when I didn't want to look. And Elise had been my light, reminding me how to stand. But Maja was the window, the one you open when you're ready to let the air back in. And maybe, just maybe, she was the beginning of a story that wouldn't need to be rewritten. Not because it was perfect, but because it was true. Maja and I built our life like a mosaic, piece by piece, with no rush to cover the cracks. We didn't chase perfection, didn't pretend to have it all figured out. There was something deeply comforting in that shared understanding. We both had histories, fractures we didn't wear on our sleeves but didn't try to hide either. Love, we learned, wasn't about completing each other. It was about holding space, walking alongside, letting the other remain whole. We never celebrated milestones like everyone else. No monthly anniversaries, no social media proclamations. Instead, we marked time in quieter ways, the first book we read aloud to each other in bed, the dinner we ruined but still ate with laughter, the first time she brought her plants over and placed them in my windowsill without asking. Her world began to take root in mine, not like an invasion, but like ivy. Slow, natural, beautiful. We adopted a routine that felt more like rhythm than habit. Sunday mornings were for the flea market, where she'd sift through old postcards and I'd hunt for vintage books I'd never read. Wednesday nights were for cooking something ambitious and usually failing. Fridays, we'd take long walks by the river, even in the rain, especially in the rain. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And yet, even in the calmest waters, something stirs beneath the surface. It started with small things. A quiet moment when her smile lingered a beat too long after reading a message. A weekend trip she planned without telling me until the day before. Once, I saw her talking with a man outside a cafe. Not intimately, not even suspiciously, but there was a familiarity in the way she leaned in, laughed too softly. I didn't ask, not because I was afraid of the answer, but because I trusted her, or wanted to, and trust, I'd learned, means choosing not to flinch at shadows. But the silence began to stretch. She stopped finishing her sentences. She stayed up late working, headphones on, distant. The rhythm shifted. I told myself not to spiral, that this was just life, that people get busy, distracted, that connection ebbs and flows. But somewhere deep down, I felt it, that awful, familiar tug. One night, I woke up and found her in the kitchen, sitting in the dark, staring at her phone. She didn't see me right away. Her face was tense, eyes glinting with something unreadable. I stepped back before she noticed. And in that moment, I hated myself for doubting her, for needing answers, for fearing the unraveling before it even began. The next day, I found her sketchbook open on the desk. She rarely let me see her unfinished work. But this page was different. It wasn't a painting or a landscape, it was a figure, me, sitting alone on a bench, surrounded by empty space. And beneath it, in tiny script, a single line. How do you tell someone you're disappearing again? My breath caught her. I didn't confront her. I didn't need to. I knew that feeling. I had been that person once, terrified of staying when it felt easier to slip away. So I waited, not out of weakness, out of respect. For her, for us, for the truth she hadn't yet gathered the courage to say. A week passed. Then another. She was still there physically. Still kissed me goodnight. Still laughed at my jokes. But the gap between us grew until even the silence had an echo. Then one Sunday, she didn't come home. I waited with 2 cups of coffee growing cold. No message, no call, just space. I tried not to panic. Told myself maybe she lost track of time, maybe she was with a friend, maybe anything but the thing I feared most. At midnight, the door opened. She stepped inside, soaked from the rain, her eyes rimmed red. "I'm sorry," she said before I could ask. And just like that, the floor gave out beneath me. She didn't explain everything at once. She just stood there, dripping and silent, before sitting on the couch like her legs might give out. "It's not someone else," she finally said. "Not really." I sat across from her, unable to speak. "It's me," she whispered. "I don't know what's wrong. I don't know why I can't stay happy. I have everything, and still I feel like I'm slipping through my own hands." I swallowed hard. "Why didn't you tell me?" She looked at me with eyes full of guilt. Because I didn't want to break something that finally felt safe. We stayed in that silence a long time. I wanted to scream, to hold her, to ask her to fight for us. But I knew that tone. I'd spoken with it once. When I was the one who left. Pain isn't always born from betrayal. Sometimes it's just the quiet grief of loving someone who's losing themselves. That night, she stayed, curled beside me like a child afraid of the dark. I held her, unsure whether I was comforting her or saying goodbye. In the morning, she was gone. Her keys on the counter, her scent still on the pillow. A note tucked under my coffee mug. "Thank you for being the one I didn't have to run from, but I need to find the version of me who knows how to stay." I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat. And in that stillness, I realized something awful and freeing. I had become the kind of person people left, not because I wasn't enough, but because I made them feel seen. And sometimes being seen is the scariest thing of all. I kept moving, kept writing. The book was finished. The publisher was thrilled. I was offered a small tour. Nothing big, just local readings, interviews, the kind of thing I used to dream about. And yet, I felt hollow. Not broken. Just echoing. The success felt like it belonged to another version of me. The one who had built this life hoping to share it. But there was no one to read it aloud to anymore. At one of the readings, a young woman approached me after the event. She held the book like it might shatter in her hands. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said. This story had made me feel like my heartbreak wasn't a failure. Just part of being alive. I smiled, thanked her, watched her disappear into the crowd. And in that moment, I understood. Maybe I wasn't meant to find forever. Maybe I was meant to remind people that even endings can be beautiful. That letting go doesn't mean losing. That love, even when it leaves behind something worth keeping. I walked home that night through quiet streets, headlights flickering on damp pavement, the air sharp with coming frost. And for the first time in years, I didn't check my phone. I didn't wait for a message. I didn't hope for return. I simply walked forward, alone. But not lost, never lost again. Winter arrived like a whisper, quiet at first, then relentless. The city wore it like a coat too heavy to shrug off, everything slowing under its weight. I found myself walking more, not less, through the cold. Something about the frostbitten air felt honest. Honest in the way people rarely are. The world stripped bare, bones showing. There was clarity in that kind of stillness. No illusions, no distractions. Just breath and steps, and the sound of your own heart learning how to beat without someone else's rhythm guiding it. I often ended up at the riverside, where the water moved just enough to remind me that life doesn't stop, not even when everything inside you begs it to. I'd stand there for long minutes, sometimes hours, watching it flow, imagining all the pieces of me that had been lost to those currents. But even rivers don't forget. They just carry things farther than we can see. One morning, I got a message from an old friend, someone I hadn't spoken to since long before Lena, long before Elise, even before I started writing again. "Saw your book in the window of a shop downtown," it read. "Never figured you'd be the type to turn heartbreak into art. Then again, maybe that's what you were always doing, I smiled. Not because it was true, but because for once it didn't sting. They were right. I had spent so long trying to escape pain. I hadn't noticed when I began shaping it into something with edges and meaning. That's what we do, isn't it? We try to make sense of the chaos, to name it, frame it, turn it into something that looks enough like healing to hold in our hands. We call it stories. But sometimes they call us back. It was late December when I saw her again. Not Lena, not Elise, Maja. I had just finished a reading at a small gallery, the kind of place where the floor creaks more than it should and the wine tastes like old cherries. She was there at the back, half shadow, half memory. Her hair was longer, a little curlier. She wore a scarf I remembered seeing once hanging from my coat rack. Our eyes met across the room like something rehearsed 100 times in dreams. She didn't smile. Neither did I. But something passed between us, a recognition, maybe, or a question neither of us had formed yet. After the crowd thinned, she approached slowly. No rush, no urgency, just presence. "Congratulations," she said, her voice a little quieter than I remembered, like she'd spent too long speaking to people who didn't listen. I read the book. I nodded, unsure whether I was supposed to thank her or apologize. "It was beautiful," she added after a beat. "And it hurt, in the best kind of way." We stood there in silence, the kind you only share with someone who's seen you undone. "I didn't expect to see you here," I finally said. "I almost didn't come." Her eyes lowered. "But then I saw your name on the flyer, and I thought maybe it was time." Time. That word again. Always the hero or the villain in every love story. We walked after that, out into the brittle night, snow beginning to fall in slow, indecisive flakes. No destination, just motion. Like all our previous walks, and yet not at all. We didn't rehash the past. We didn't ask for forgiveness, we just talked. About the time between then and now. About therapy and art, and the cities we'd each visited alone. About people we met who taught us something, and people we met who broke us a little more. She told me she'd been painting again, not for exhibitions or clients, but just for herself. "I stopped trying to capture feelings," she said. "No, I just let them bleed." When we reached the river, we stood there like old ghosts meeting at the edge of what was. The water was partially frozen, reflecting city lights in jagged patterns. "Do you think people change?" she asked suddenly. I thought for a moment. I think people grow. And sometimes that means they outgrow their mistakes. She nodded quietly, then looked at me. "I wasn't ready for you then," she said. "But I think part of me always carried you." I turned to her, unsure whether to hold those words close or push them away. "I don't need promises," she added quickly, "or explanations. I just wanted to tell you I see it now. What you gave me, what I left behind." And just like that, I felt something in me loosen. Not hope, not regret, just release. We didn't kiss. We didn't plan to meet again. She placed her hand on my chest for one long second, then turned and walked away. I watched her go, not with longing, but with something that felt like peace. Weeks passed, then months. I moved apartments. Something smaller, warmer, filled with light. I built new shelves, filled them with books and postcards from places I hadn't visited yet. I started hosting small writing groups. Not for career, but for community. For the quiet joy of sitting in a room full of people brave enough to share their voices. One night, after a long session, I returned home to find an envelope on my doormat. No name, no return address. Inside was a postcard, a painting of a bench by a river empty, bathed in early morning light. On the back, 2 words. "Still here." I smiled. Folded it in half, tucked it inside my copy of the book I had written. Life moved on, as it always does. Not in dramatic leaps, but in quiet turns. I dated again. Nothing serious, nothing long. Just reminders that connection still existed, even in small doses. I stopped measuring love by how long it lasted. Instead, I started asking, did it change me? Did it matter? On the anniversary of my book's release, I received an invitation, an offer to speak at a university about the power of personal storytelling. I accepted. Not because I had answers, but because I had lived the questions, and I knew that was enough. During the talk, a student asked me if the people in my stories ever come back. I paused, then answered, sometimes, but by the time they do, you're not the same person waiting for them. She nodded. I nodded too. That night, I returned to the riverside alone. The air was cold again, but the kind that doesn't bite, just reminds you you're alive. I watched the water, the same river, but different now. Or maybe I was. And just as I turned to leave, someone stepped into view. Not close, just enough to be seen. Not Lena, not Elise, not Maja. A stranger. Or maybe not. It didn't matter. Because for the first time in a long time, I didn't need to look back. And that's the twist, isn't it? After all the heartbreaks, all the chasing, all the letting go, we spend so much time waiting for someone to come back that we forget the most important return of all is the one where we come back to ourselves. And this time, enjoyed the video. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell so you never miss an update.